Chess College, how y'all doing? And welcome to the first full week of the course of Humanities 2 as we trips our way through the arts and the Renaissance. Um, how'd y'all make it through the first week? Are you staying high and dry? Um, if not, I hope you will. Hope you are. Hope you're sheltered and you got a good computer access. This week, we're getting into the course seriously. Last week, it was just an introduction. Um, by now, everybody should have the book. This is what it looks like. That's what it looks like. There are other editions. It's okay if you have those. This is the one I have, volume two. Make sure it's volume two, but there might be a sixth or eighth edition. That's okay if you get those. If you get volume one, that's the wrong one. Make sure it says volume two because it starts in the 16th century. That's where we're starting on this journey through the humanities. So look at that and start looking at chapter 19. It's really the first chapter in the book, but it's volume one, two, so it's like a sequel. So make sure you start on chapter 19. It covers a lot. This is an area that you're writing about it right now. You're writing your first paper about Martin Luther, the radical religious visionary. Some say zealot. They wanted to put him on trial and for high. The church wanted him dead. They did, and it wasn't pretty. And the Catholic Church was huge and popular and ran everything with an iron fist. They actually had their own army. If you don't like it, they would send the army after you. So he went against them and started a religious reform that changed the entire face of the world. Because up until then, the Roman Catholic Church controlled everything. Um, like I said, with an army. Um, he wrote his famous manifesto, 95 points thesis, and he posted them on the door, the Catholic door, and he was brought up in charges and put on trial for all sorts of nasty things, but he survived the day. And after that, people start reading it and understanding a little bit more about their own religion. Um, Most people in those days could not read or write. And so the power always has the knowledge. And, but during this era, the printing press became available and they started printing out different versions of the Bible for mass consumption. Up until then, it was all handwritten out by monks and given out to very few people, mostly the aristocracy and other religious leaders. That's the rich folks' votes, people privilege, because most people did not know how to read. And so if they had the Bible, it didn't do them much good because it was just a big old book with a bunch of words. So anyway, religion started changing once they started understanding it and reading about it and digging deeper than just listening to their ministers or their priests. So and taking their word for it, they wanted to find out themselves, and that's the thing that Luther started. Now, some of you are finding other information about Luther that maybe he didn't like Jews. He didn't like. Well, bring it on. Put it in your paper if that's there. Nobody's perfect, and the world was still pretty new at this point in time. Someone wrote me a text, a student, and said, "Can we do outside research besides the text, or what you're reading, or the documentary I posted?" Of course you can. Those are just samples of what's out there. There's a lot of stuff out there. Don't be overwhelmed by it though, because it's only 3 to 5 page paper. Typical essay, and you're not just copying pasting something information off a website or source like Wikipedia. You don't want to do that. I want you to read it, put it in your own words, put your own thoughts into it, your own criticism, your own take on this whole situation with Martin Luther, his importance in the world. Usually, these papers, if you start off with one simple question, why do they matter? For good or bad, that's got to be in there. These are important people in the face of history, and they are responsible for who we are today, essentially, 600 years later. That's how important their philosophy was, and their beliefs we're still looking at all these years later. Um, the Protestant Church sprang up from that. So that's anything that's not from the Holy Roman Catholic Church. So then we have, because of the printmaker, we've got the printing press, and now we can produce things. So, uh, how would you write a novel in the 1500s? Why would you write one? Well, a few people did. One of them was Cervantes, who was a Spanish writer and wrote a, possibly, they don't know for sure, but considered one of the first novels, classic novels, what we think is a novel ever written, called Don Quixote. Now, what is a novel? You should know what the word means. It's a creative work of fiction. It's not a biography, it's not an autobiography, it's not nonfiction. Now we categorize things differently now: fiction, nonfiction, memoir, but it was a fictionalized story. And and it was a bestseller. People, because of the printing press, there more people were able to read, learn how to read. The masses, not just certain few people who could go to special schools to learn. Because now you could buy a book at a shop, which was unheard of up until the printing press became available. So modern times, what we consider modern times, is beginning. No, there's no electricity, folks, not yet, but there is starting to be um, sewage, which is a big deal. Florence, Italy, is considered having the first sewage system in the history of Western Europe. Um, Up until then, there was no such thing as a sewage system. They developed a sewage system with a river that flowed underneath the streets. So the waste product from us went into the river, out to the ocean. But before then, it was going out in the backyard or in the front yard. It was not going very far away. And so there was a lot of sickness, a lot of early death, typhoid fever, hepatitis, because it's not good to sleep where you defecate and urinate. And when there's millions of people living in a small area, that's a lot, folks. It brings on illnesses. After Florence got to flush their sewage out to the ocean and away from the people, they got healthier. That meant they wanted to live, they wanted to do things, they learned how to read, they started appreciating literature, and they started appreciating art. Painters like Michelangelo started painting and in earnest, and he painted his famous paintings in Florence Sistine Chapel. Maybe you've seen the religious paintings. It's in the book. You can Google him. They've made several movies about him, and books have been written about him as being the forefront of the Renaissance artists, painters. So this is an exciting time to actually live in the world. No, folks, there's no computers. There was no electric cars, sorry. There's no Netflix, but they had other things they were doing that was equally as important and exciting. And they had to do it the old fashioned way, using their imagination. It wasn't handed to them. So Now we got printmaking, we got a novel like Don Quixote coming out, and then we have plays being written. You know what a play is? Well, next week we're going to go delve into stage plays, especially one person called William Shakespeare. Maybe you've heard of him. Have you ever seen a Shakespeare play? Well, that's going to be your discussion this week. Give me your take on Shakespeare. Most of us experienced Shakespeare through in high school. I don't know what they teach in high school anymore, but in my day, we had to learn how to read Shakespeare and appreciate Hamlet or Macbeth. And it's terrified everybody because it was hard to understand. The language is in heightened poetic iambic pentameter. That's the type of poetry. And it's very difficult to comprehend. And so a lot of people have a lifelong fear of Shakespeare until you see it explained and performed in such a way that makes it understandable. And it's incredible. It is the entire human condition written 600 years ago by a guy who never got out of England. How? Why? Where does this all come from? Well, we're going to be going into it next week. So, and I'm going to try to make it as exciting as it should be because William Shakespeare was the Quentin Tarantino of his day. Anyway, so then we have other artists popping up. You look at it in your book, you'll see paintings. Um, some of them are very rather surreal and disturbing, which is how life is, folks. Um, People who paint, and it's just a photograph, not that there's photographs in those days of what they see. That's awesome. Other people were painting what they were feeling in here. It was coming out through the paintbrush. We'll talk about painters in about 2 3 weeks. Um, in earnest. So then now we've got the Renaissance art movement artists, and the artists are starting painters and musicians. Modern music, it's not quite there yet, but it's beginning. The beginnings of literally the scales in music and how to um, interpret them and listen to them and play them is starting to become a thing. Um, so this week, I want you to concentrate on Luther and put your best critical hat on when you're writing about him, why he matters. The old world is shattered. New beginnings are scary. The revolt is on. People want more. People want freedom to express their innermost desires. They just don't want to work and pay taxes and die young because everybody did die young in those days because the medicine was very primitive. But during this era, too, first modern surgeries were starting to happen where they actually, instead of just cutting stuff off, which what they did in the early days, they're actually trying to keep not from doing that, try to heal it instead of cutting things off. So then we have um, the protest and reform, and this is all during this period. So it's an exciting time. It's really the beginning of the early stages of what they call the Renaissance, which is humanity flourishing to the best of what we're capable of. We're not just trying to feed ourselves to stay alive, survival. We're actually expressing who we are as humans. And so now we have art, literature, other forms of expression to get that out. And that's where we are in this early chapter 19. Please look at it when you're writing your paper and look at that documentary I showed. And it's due, I think, this Friday. So please have it in on time. Um, Look at it carefully. It says 3 to 5 pages. So it has to be minimally 3 pages. Don't go more than five. It makes it too long for me to read because there's a lot of you and I have several classes and it's hard for me to read every paper if it's too long. I won't ground you for being too long, but it needs to be 3 pages. You will lose points if it isn't. The reason why this is important because writing these academic college papers is a discipline. And as you go along in your college career, you'll have to write more of these things. And by the time you get into the graduate program, I hope you all do get there. I mean, my graduate paper I had to write had to be a minimal of 100 pages. Had 25 citations, and it took me 6 months to write it. And it was rejected 3 times. And I kept submitting it, and they kept going, "You could do better." Finally, I got through it, but it's a challenge. Academic writing is a challenge. You want to do the MLA uh, format. If you don't know what that is, you can look it up easily enough. What it should look like: double space, 1 inch margins all around the paper, title page with your name, my name, the course name, the paper's name, and the date. Simple. And then start on page one. Should have a running header. I'll talk about this more. Should have a running header at the top of the page that has the page number on it and the title of your paper. And it's not essay one. That's not the title. That's the assignment. You can make up your own title. It all begins. The Renaissance is here. Reform and Revolt. You can come up with some clever titles, please do. And then make sure you have 2 or 3 at least citations, and then have a works cited page at the end. It's not called bibliography. It's not called um, references. That's APA, although I won't mark you down if it is. Um, and then make sure you put your citations. So if I want to look them up, I can. You got to know how to do an APA citation, or I should say an MLA. So I teach both classes. We're doing MLA in this class, the humanities. I teach other classes in the psychology department, and so they're different. So anyway, here we go. What else is going on out there? Oh, yeah, I just want to mention one more thing. Your journal sample. Did you see the sample of it? I printed it the other day. It's in announcements. That's what your journal should look like. Your journal should have 17 entries for all 17 weeks. It should have be a paragraph long for each week. And in that paragraph, you should talk about it's like a diary. What we read in the textbook, what what I've talked about in these lectures, what you saw, maybe in a documentary, what your paper was about, what you read in the book. And here's the key to it: it's called a reflection, journal reflection. You're just not putting out the stats, you're reflecting on what you learned that week. Did you get anything out of it? Did you learn something? Was it interesting? Was it boring? Was it, tell me what you thought. It lets me know that you're paying attention, you're reading the material, you're looking at the material. We're not in a room together, so I can't go around and point to you in the class, which I know everybody hates anyway. I do too. And I don't want to do that. And so it lets me know you paid attention and got through the class by understanding the material. The better you understand it, the better I am at my job. If you're not understanding it, I'm failing you, and I don't want to fail you. I'm here for you guys, okay? You know how to get a hold of me, rexhaas at yahoo.com, 530-941-9661. My name is Rex, Professor Thompson to you, and we are in this class of humanities together, taking this journey, and it begins this week in earnest. Good luck in papers. I'll see you in a couple days.